Welcome to another tying video, folks. Today we are tying my cotton candy egg nymph. It's a Euro nymph style fly. Go-to fly for me in parts of the fall and the spring when either the salmon are spawning or the trout are spawning. And I'm not fishing for spawning trout, but other trout and whitefish are going to be keyed up on egg patterns. So this is going to be primarily a purple fly with a pink bead, and really probably that pink bead is doing most of the work. So cheers, and let's get right into it. All right, so today I'm tying on a fulling mill 50-45 jig hook, size 14, and these fulling mill hooks are far and away my favorite jig hooks. I've tried a few others. I mean, I tie with whatever the fly shop I was just at had, but those are by far my favorite when I can get them. And then I'm also using Montana Fly Company hot pink tungsten beads, 3.8 millimeters with a size 14 hook, which is kind of my go-to. And then 6/0 purple uni thread. So just gonna get that started right up behind the eye. Do about 4 or 5 wraps back, and then 4 or 5 touching wraps forward to the bead, and trim that thread. Next, I'm using a few fibers from a whiting tailing pack feather. If you wanted to be really perfect about this, you would probably use Coq de Leon because it's a little bit stiffer and a little bit glossier, but I think the reality of the fishing doesn't actually matter. And then I like a few more tails than a lot of guys. The guys at the fly shop I used to work at would go 3 to 5 fibers, but I like, I don't know, maybe 6, 7, 8. I just feel like 3 to 5 isn't enough to really be seen, and I think that trout don't count very good. So even if a real mayfly nymph only has 3 tails, I don't think 8 is a problem. So anyways, I find that it's really easy to tie my tails too long. So I like to underestimate, make them real short, lay them along the top of the hook, grab them with your other thumb, and then tie them in. Doesn't take very many wraps, 2, 3, and get them slotted into the bead itself. I'm going to put down a 4th one, and then trim off those tags. Next, we're adding a little bit of small silver wire for ribbing, and I'm only going to cut off a little bit. Normally I'd cut off a bigger chunk, but I'm only tying one of these for the purpose of this video. So I've cut off my piece and slide that into the slot on the bead right along the top. Unlock that in nice and tight. 2, 3, and just start walking your thread back and touching wraps. So I like to tie my Euro nymphs, especially the ones that are these just kind of, this isn't a quildagon, but these small ones, I like to tie them really thin with a really bulbous head. And let's be frank, the trout are probably basically eating the bead, but you never know. I'm tying the rest of the fly too. So I've got 2 layers of thread, and then the tail fibers, and then the wire with another layer of thread going back over that, and then only 1 layer plus the tail fibers and the wire all the way down to about a little before the bend, approximately where the barb would be on this hook if it had one. And then wrap that forward again, nice touching wraps. So basically you've got 2 layers. And the trick to this is pulling and holding that wire and those tail fibers straight along the top of the shank of the hook as you do this. So then I just wrap back forward, nice touching wraps, gonna make a nice smooth body. There's a little bit of extra bulk at the head, but that's all right because we're gonna put a little bit of dubbing on there for a collar. Get to the front, and then I got a rotary vise, so I just put a 2-turn whip finish in here. 1, 2, so I can utilize that rotary function as I wrap the wire forward. Now you just grab that wire and wrap it counter to the direction of the threads. Nice, even wraps. All the way forward, just have a little bit of rib, a little bit of extra contrast. Make it just a little bit more exciting for the fish. And I like to try and finish, this is perfect, this just happened to work out perfect, with the wire right behind the top of the bead, because that's where you have the most space for messing up, basically. 2, 3, 4 nice tight wraps. You don't really need 4. You could get away with probably 3 or even 2. And then you just, the best way to break off your wire rather than trying to cut it is to just helicopter it off, and it'll snap off right at the thread. Now this next step is not required, but I fish these flies hard and a lot, and I like to get as much durability out of my flies as I can. So I'm not even going to tie any, I'm not even going to put a whip finish in there, but I'm just going to take some Solar Res, basically my UV cure resin of choice, paint that on there, and I like to try and not wrap around too much, just spinning the fly around, I mean. So that way I don't get too much resin on the thread or on the dangling thread. And then I also like to put some resin on the bead itself, because these colored beads are notorious for the paint chipping off while you're fishing. And even with this added resin protection, it'll still chip off eventually, but it's going to last a lot longer if you put a little layer of the resin on there. And then hit that with the UV flashlight. Sweet. And we're almost done with this bad boy. Now for our final ingredient, I'm going to add a little collar on this thing. So when I was first learning to tie, and for years, I never used dubbing wax, but it's not that expensive, and I'm all about buying relatively cheap tying materials and substituting in whatever you have for whatever a recipe calls for. But it's relatively cheap, and it makes a huge difference if you're trying to tie a dubbing noodle. So use a little bit of dubbing wax, and then I'm using a little bit of gray hair fur for my dubbing, and just a tiny little pinch, because this is a small fly, relatively small, and you can always add more dubbing, but it's hard to take it off. Okay, so that looks just about perfect to me. Gonna wrap that on there, and this is gonna disguise that bulk that you had from the couple extra wraps. Okay, it's on there, and now I'm putting in 3 wraps behind the bead, and then I'm gonna do 2 4-turn whip finishes. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I like to make the knot finish right along the top of the fly, right where that slot is. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nice. So now I have a nice narrow collar, little bit of thread between the collar and the bead, and then a nice bulbous head on this fly. And that's all there is to it. I don't hit that thread at the end with any UV, because it's just too tough for me to get it on there without impacting the collar. So hopefully we can get a nice good look at this. Beautiful pink, some tails, nice even wire segmented body, and that's gonna crush all year, but especially when there's eggs in the river. All right, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will catch you guys in the next video.